The first bullet hit a Marine in the chest before he even reached for his weapon. The second one shattered the glass door of Ward 7. Victor Klein stepped over the bleeding body, grabbed a wounded soldier by the hair, and dragged him across the floor like garbage. "Where is Caldwell?" he whispered. No answer. He pressed the suppressor under the Marine's chin. "I'll ask every person in this building, and every person who doesn't answer dies." 30 killers poured in behind him. 30 professional mercenaries against 3 Marines and 1 nurse. One clumsy, trembling, useless nurse who couldn't carry a tray without dropping it. That nurse was about to kill every single one of them. If this story doesn't keep you on the edge of your seat, nothing will. Subscribe to this channel right now, follow this story to the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. The call came at 11:43 on a Tuesday night, and Captain Richard Graves almost didn't answer it. He was sitting in his office at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, half a cup of cold coffee in his hand, reviewing discharge paperwork that didn't matter and wouldn't matter for another 6 hours. His phone buzzed. Restricted number. He almost let it ring out. He picked up on the 4th ring. "Graves." The voice on the other end didn't identify itself. It never did. "You're receiving a new nurse tonight, Emily Carter, transferred from Bethesda Overflow. She starts immediately on Ward 7. Graves frowned. "I didn't request additional staff." "You didn't need to." "Who authorized this?" "Above your clearance, Captain. She reports at midnight. Treat her like any other junior nurse. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." The line went dead. Graves stared at his phone for a long time. 22 years in military medicine, and he knew exactly what that kind of call meant. Someone important was playing chess, and he had just been told which square to stand on. He didn't ask questions. He never did. At midnight, Emily Carter walked through the staff entrance of Ward 7, carrying a bag that looked too heavy for her thin frame. She had brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, glasses that sat slightly crooked on her nose, scrubs that looked half a size too big. She bumped her hip against the doorframe coming in and muttered an apology to nobody. Corporal Jamie Reyes was the first to see her. He was leaning against the nurse's station, flipping a coin between his knuckles, bored out of his mind. He looked her up and down and didn't bother hiding his disappointment. "You're the new nurse?" "Yes, Emily Carter. I'm sorry, I know it's late. They told me to report directly, and I wasn't sure where to go, so I just followed the signs. And I hope that's okay because nobody was at the front desk, and I didn't want to bother anyone." She said all of that in one breath. Reyes stared at her. "You done?" "Sorry, yes, sorry." He pointed down the hall. "Ward 7, secure wing. You don't go past the blue line without escort. You don't touch the patient in room 4 without authorization. You don't talk to anyone about what you see and hear. Clear?" "Crystal clear. Thank you. I really appreciate it." Reyes watched her walk away, bumping her bag against the wall as she went. He shook his head and muttered under his breath, "We're all gonna die." He didn't know how right he was. The patient in room 4 was Commander Nathan Caldwell, United States Navy, Naval Intelligence Division. 6 days earlier, someone had tried to kill him in Baghdad. A car bomb missed him by 11 feet, but sent enough shrapnel through his left side to keep him in surgery for 9 hours. He survived because he was stubborn, because the field medics were fast, and because God or luck or whatever you believe in decided it wasn't his time. But someone disagreed with that decision. Caldwell was alive, and that was a problem for very powerful people. The kind of people who signed defense contracts worth billions. The kind of people who moved money through shell companies in Cyprus and Dubai. The kind of people who had already bought senators, generals, and entire oversight committees. Caldwell had the evidence, all of it. Dates, names, account numbers, recorded conversations. He was supposed to testify before a classified congressional panel in 9 days. If he talked, empires would crumble. Careers would end. People would go to prison for the rest of their lives, so they sent someone to make sure he never talked. But someone else sent Emily first. The first 3 nights were painful, not because of danger, because of boredom and humiliation. Sergeant Marcus Donovan ran Ward 7's Marine security detail like it was Fallujah. 6 Marines, rotating shifts, constant vigilance. Donovan was 6'3", built like a refrigerator someone had taught to do push-ups, and he had exactly 0 patience for weakness. Emily Carter was weakness personified. On her first night, she knocked over a supply cart. Metal instruments scattered across the floor like a percussion concert nobody asked for. Every Marine in the hallway spun around, hands on weapons. Donovan looked at her with a kind of disgust usually reserved for people who talk during the national anthem. "Pick it up," he said. "I'm so sorry, I'm really sorry, it just slipped, and I tried to catch it but my hand was wet, and then it just went everywhere, and I feel terrible." I said pick it up, not narrate it. She scrambled on her hands and knees, collecting forceps and gauze packs while her face turned red. Private First Class Daniel Brooks, the youngest Marine on the detail, actually felt bad for her. He knelt down to help. "Don't," Donovan said. Brooks froze. "She needs to learn. This isn't a civilian hospital. This is a secured military installation protecting a high-value asset. If she can't handle a supply cart, she can't handle this ward." Emily didn't look up. She just kept picking things up, whispering apologies like a prayer. That night, after she finished her rounds, Brooks found her sitting alone in the break room. Her hands were shaking. Not a lot, just enough to notice. "Hey," he said, "don't let Donovan get to you. He's like that with everyone." She looked up. Her eyes were red. "I just want to do a good job. I know I'm not what they expected." Nobody expects anything on night shift. Just keep the commander's vitals stable and stay out of Donovan's way. You'll be fine. She nodded. "Thank you, Daniel. That's really kind." He smiled. "It's Brooks. Everyone calls me Brooks." "Okay, Brooks." She almost smiled back. Almost. Brooks walked away thinking she was sweet. Fragile, maybe, but sweet. He had no idea he was talking to someone who had killed more enemy combatants than his entire squad combined. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes had spent 14 years in the most classified unit in the United States military. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DEVGRU. The unit most people called SEAL Team 6, though nobody in the unit ever used that name. Her call sign was Ghost Line, and she had earned it. She earned it in Yemen, where she spent 11 months undercover as a humanitarian aid worker, mapping an entire terrorist logistics network before calling in the strike that dismantled it in one night. She earned it in the South China Sea, where she conducted a solo underwater infiltration of a foreign intelligence vessel and extracted encrypted communications that prevented what analysts later called a near-certain military confrontation. She earned it in places that didn't have names on any map, doing things that didn't exist in any record, for reasons that would never be explained to the public. Ghostline didn't just operate in shadows, she became them. And right now, she was playing the most important role of her career. A scared, incompetent, forgettable nurse. Every stumble was calculated. Every drop tray was deliberate. Every nervous apology was designed to make everyone in Ward 7 dismiss her completely. Because the most dangerous position in any tactical scenario isn't the one people watch. It's the one they ignore. And nobody ignores harder than Marines who think you're useless. On the second night, Donovan tested her. Not formally, he would never admit to it. But he left his sidearm on the counter of the nurse's station, magazine out, safety off, and watched to see what she would do. Emily saw the weapon. Her training screamed at her to clear it, check the chamber, secure it properly. A Sig Sauer M18. She knew the weight, the trigger pull, the effective range. She could have field-stripped it blindfolded in under 30 seconds. Instead, she gasped, took 2 steps back and called for Reyes. "There's a gun on the counter. I don't think it should be there. Should I move it? I don't want to touch it. Can someone please move it? Reyes looked at Donovan. Donovan looked at Emily. He picked up the weapon without a word, slid the magazine back in, and holstered it. Don't touch anything you don't understand, Carter. I won't, I promise. I'm sorry. Donovan walked away, satisfied. She was exactly what he thought she was. Harmless, useless, background noise. Emily went back to checking vitals, and behind those crooked glasses, her eyes were ice cold. Test passed. On the third night, she made her first real contact with Commander Caldwell. He was awake, which was unusual. The pain medication should have kept him under until morning, but Caldwell was fighting it. His eyes were open, scanning the ceiling, calculating something only he could see. Emily checked his IV line. Her hands trembled slightly, practiced trembling. How are you feeling, Commander? He looked at her, really looked at her. Caldwell was naval intelligence. He had spent his career reading people, and something about this nurse didn't add up. Nothing he could articulate, just a feeling. Who sent you? He asked. Bethesda Overflow. I was transferred because of staffing shortages. I didn't ask where you came from. I asked who sent you. Emily blinked, adjusted her glasses. I don't understand the question, sir. I'm just a nurse. Caldwell studied her for a long moment. Then he winced, a spike of pain pulling his attention. Forget it. The meds are making me paranoid. That's completely normal, sir. Opioid-based analgesics can cause heightened suspicion and mild paranoia. It's a known side effect. Is it? Yes, sir. Very common. Try to rest. He closed his eyes. But just before she reached the door, he spoke again. Carter. Yes, sir. If something happens in this hospital, if something goes wrong, you run. You hear me? You're not built for what might be coming. You run and you don't look back. Emily paused. For one fraction of a second, something shifted behind her eyes. Something cold, something lethal, something that had stared down death in a dozen countries and never blinked. Then it was gone. I'll keep that in mind, sir. Good night. She closed the door gently. Caldwell stared at the ceiling. Something about her bothered him. He couldn't figure out what. On the fourth night, Emily received an encrypted communication through a device hidden inside her medical bag. Not a phone, not a radio, a burst transmitter that looked like a penlight and operated on a frequency that didn't officially exist. The message was 3 words. Timeline accelerated. Ready. She decoded it in her head. No paper, no digital trace. The kill team was coming sooner than expected. Intelligence suggested the original timeline was 10 days out, timed to Caldwell's transfer to a less secure facility. But something had changed. Someone inside the security chain had moved the timetable up. That meant one thing. There was a traitor inside Walter Reed. Emily cataloged every person she had interacted with. Graves, Donovan, Reyes, Brooks, the other 2 Marines on rotation, Petty and Wallace, the night janitor, the 2 other nurses on the floor, the cafeteria staff who delivered meals to the secure wing. Someone was feeding information to the outside. Someone had given them the security rotation, the patrol gaps, the backup generator codes, the radio frequencies. Emily didn't know who yet, but she would. She had 72 hours, maybe less. She started preparing. The next morning, during a shift change she shouldn't have been present for, Emily accidentally wandered into the maintenance corridor behind Ward 7. She apologized profusely to the technician who found her there, explaining that she had gotten lost looking for the supply closet. I'm so sorry. This hospital is so confusing. Everything looks the same to me. I swear I turned left where I was supposed to turn right. The technician walked her back, shaking his head. What he didn't notice was that during her 60 seconds in that corridor, Emily had mapped every junction, identified 2 unmarked exits, located the manual override panel for the wing's fire suppression system, and noted that the maintenance tunnel connected to the building's HVAC system, which ran directly above the MRI suite on the floor below. 60 seconds, entire tactical blueprint committed to memory. That evening, she dropped another tray, this time in the hallway directly outside the security office. As she knelt to clean up the mess, she listened to the conversation happening behind the partially open door. Donovan was on the phone. "I need the rotation extended. We're thin on the night shift, and if something happens, I've got 3 Marines and a nurse who can barely stand up straight." A pause. "I understand budget constraints, sir, but I'm responsible for the commander's safety, and I'm telling you we need more bodies in this ward." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood. We'll make do." He hung up. Emily heard him slam his fist on the desk. "We'll make do," he repeated to himself, and the frustration in his voice was real. Whatever else Donovan was, he was a Marine who took his duty seriously. He knew they were exposed. He knew the security was thin, and he couldn't do a damn thing about it. Emily finished cleaning up and walked away. Now she knew the security posture. 3 Marines per shift, limited backup response, restricted communication channels. If the kill team hit during the night rotation, Donovan would have himself, Reyes, Brooks, and whatever warm body happened to be on the adjacent floor. That wasn't enough, not against what was coming. She would have to be enough. On the 5th night, 71 hours before the attack she now believed was imminent, Emily did something that should have gotten her caught. She visited the MRI suite. It was after hours. The imaging department was closed. She used a key card she had cloned from the maintenance technician's badge 3 days earlier, a process that took her 11 seconds while pretending to stumble into him in the cafeteria. The MRI suite housed a 3 Tesla superconducting magnet. Most people thought of MRI machines as medical tools. Emily thought of them as weapons. A 3 Tesla magnet generates a magnetic field 60,000 times stronger than Earth's natural field, strong enough to rip a steel oxygen tank across a room at lethal velocity, strong enough to pin a man in body armor to the bore of the machine and hold him there until someone turned it off. Emily studied the room. She memorized the control panel. She identified the emergency shutdown and, more importantly, the emergency startup procedure. She calculated distances and angles. She noted which positions in the room fell within the magnet's most powerful field gradient. Then she left. No trace, no evidence, no cameras, because she had identified the blind spot in the imaging department's security feed on her first day, during one of her lost wanderings. When she returned to Ward 7, Brooks was waiting. "Where were you?" Donovan's been asking. "Bathroom, I'm sorry. I think the cafeteria fish didn't agree with me." Brooks grimaced. "Yeah, the fish here is a war crime. You okay?" "I'll be fine. Thank you for asking, Brooks." He nodded and went back to his post. Emily sat down at the nurse's station, opened a patient chart, and began writing notes in her careful, slightly messy handwriting. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody ever did. And that was exactly the point. 71 hours. The kill team was coming. 30 professionals trained to breach, eliminate, and vanish. Against them stood 3 Marines who didn't know the threat, a wounded intelligence officer who couldn't walk, and a nurse they thought couldn't carry a tray. And somewhere inside these walls, a traitor was counting down the same clock. Emily Carter adjusted her crooked glasses and kept writing. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes checked her mental inventory for the 9th time. She was ready. The question wasn't whether she could survive what was coming. The question was whether she could keep everyone else alive long enough for them to find out who she really was. And whether, when they found out, it would already be too late. 71 hours collapsed into nothing. Emily felt it before she heard it. A vibration in the floor. Deep. Wrong. The kind of vibration that doesn't come from generators or HVAC systems. It comes from detonation charges planted against concrete walls. 2:17 a.m. The lights died. Not a flicker. Not a brownout. Every single light in Walter Reed's secure wing went black at the same instant. and the silence that followed was the loudest thing Emily had ever heard. No hum from the fluorescent tubes, no beeping from the backup monitors, no static from the radios clipped to the Marines' vests. Dead air, total darkness, and Emily Hayes smiled. Because she had expected this 48 hours ago, and every single thing she needed was already in place. Reyes was the first to react. He grabbed his radio and keyed the transmit button 3 times fast. Nothing, not even static. He switched channels. Nothing. Switched again. Dead on every frequency. "Comms are down," he said, and his voice was steady but his breathing wasn't. Donovan was already moving. He pulled his night vision from his vest pouch and snapped it over his helmet. Green world. Limited depth. Better than blind. "Brooks, lock down room 4. Nobody in or out. Reyes, cover the east corridor. Wallace, Petty, hold the nurses' station." "Sergeant," Brooks said, "what about Carter?" "What about her?" "She's in the supply room." Donovan didn't even pause. "She stays there. Safest place for her. Move." Brooks moved. 2:18 a.m. Emily was not in the supply room. Emily was in the ceiling. She had entered the maintenance crawl space through a vent panel she had loosened 4 days earlier during one of her clumsy wanderings. She was flat on her stomach, moving through ductwork with the practiced silence of someone who had infiltrated enemy compounds in absolute darkness more times than she could count. Her nurse's scrubs were gone. Underneath, she wore a compression layer she had smuggled in, piece by piece, inside her oversized medical bag. No body armor, no helmet, no night vision. She didn't need them for what came next. She carried 3 items: a ceramic blade strapped to her thigh, a penlight modified to emit infrared only, and a syringe loaded with succinylcholine, a fast-acting paralytic that would drop a 200-pound man in 9 seconds. She reached the junction above the main corridor and stopped. Listened. Footsteps below. Not Marine footsteps. Marines in Walter Reed wore standard-issue boots with rubber soles. These footsteps were different. Tactical. Evenly spaced. The disciplined rhythm of operators who had breached buildings before. She counted them by sound alone. 4 in the first group, moving toward Ward 7 from the east stairwell. 2:19 a.m. The lobby was already gone. Victor Klein had planned this assault for 11 weeks. He had floor plans purchased from a defense contractor's database. He had security rotations leaked by someone inside the hospital's chain of command. He had radio jamming equipment that blanketed every military and civilian frequency within a half-mile radius. He had thermal imaging. He had 30 men, each one a former special operations soldier from a different country, each one paid enough to retire afterward, each one willing to kill everyone in this building to reach one man in one room. Klein himself was former British SAS, 12 years, 3 combat tours, dishonorably discharged for an incident in Helmand Province that was classified so deeply even his own government pretended it never happened. He found private military work within a month. The people who hired him didn't care about honor. They cared about results. And Klein always delivered results. He stood in the lobby now, stepping over the body of the night security guard, speaking calmly into his throat microphone. "Alpha Team, East Stairwell. Bravo Team, Service Elevator. Charlie Team, hold perimeter. Delta Team with me through the main corridor. Target is room 4, 3rd floor, secure wing. Rules of engagement are simple. Anyone who is not our target is expendable. Caldwell dies last. I need to confirm the kill personally." His second-in-command, a South African named Decker, nodded. "And the Marines? What about them?" "There are 6 on rotation." Klein almost laughed. "There are 3 on night shift, and from what our friend inside tells me, they've been babysitting a nurse who can barely tie her own shoes. This will take 20 minutes. Decker smiled. "Fastest job we've ever done." Klein didn't smile back. He never did before an operation. "Don't get comfortable. Move." 2:20 a.m. Brooks reached room 4 and found Commander Caldwell already awake. The man was sitting up in bed, IV still attached, eyes wide open in the darkness. "What's happening?" Caldwell asked. "Power's out, sir. Comms are down. Sergeant Donovan ordered a lockdown." "This isn't a power failure, Private." "Sir? They're here. They cut the power and jammed communications simultaneously. That's a coordinated breach. How many exits does this wing have?" Brooks hesitated. "3, sir. East stairwell, main corridor, and service elevator. They'll cover all 3. We're boxed in." Caldwell tried to swing his legs off the bed and gasped. The shrapnel wounds in his left side screamed. "Help me up." "Sir, you can't move. Your stitches will tear." "My stitches don't matter if I'm dead. Help me up, Marine." Brooks grabbed his arm and pulled him to his feet. Caldwell nearly collapsed but caught himself on the bed rail. His face was white. Sweat ran down his jaw. "There's a weapon in the bottom drawer of that cabinet," Caldwell said. "Taped behind the files. Get it." Brooks stared. "Sir, how do you have a weapon in a hospital room?" "Because I'm naval intelligence, and I don't trust anyone. Get the weapon, Private." Brooks opened the drawer, reached behind the files, and pulled out a Beretta M9 in a magnetic holster. He checked the magazine. Full. He racked the slide and handed it to Caldwell. Caldwell's hand was shaking, but his grip was solid. "Now close that door and don't open it for anyone you don't recognize." 2:22 a.m. Donovan heard them before he saw them. The east corridor. Soft footsteps. Multiple. He pressed himself flat against the wall and raised his rifle. Through his night vision, he saw 4 figures emerge from the stairwell door. They moved in a diamond formation, rifles up, suppressors attached, laser sights cutting green lines through the darkness. Professional. Donovan's stomach dropped, but his hands didn't shake. 14 years in the Marine Corps, Ramadi, Sangin, places where you either learned to fight in the dark or you died in it. He keyed his radio out of instinct. Dead. Useless. He was alone. 4 on 1. He took a breath, let half of it out, and fired. The first round hit the point man in the throat. He went down hard, no sound except the wet thud of a body hitting linoleum. The other 3 scattered instantly. Donovan had already moved. He rolled behind a medical cart and fired twice more. 1 hit, 1 miss. The hit caught the second man in the shoulder and spun him sideways. Return fire shredded the cart. Metal instruments exploded into the air. Something hot grazed Donovan's left ear, and he felt blood run down his neck. "Contact East Corridor," he shouted, knowing nobody could hear him on comms, but hoping his Marines would hear his voice. Reyes heard. He came running from his position and opened fire down the hallway, catching the 3rd attacker in a crossfire. The man dropped. The 4th pulled back into the stairwell. Donovan and Reyes looked at each other in the green glow of their night vision. "How many?" Reyes asked. "I counted 4 here. There will be more." "How do you know?" "Because 4 isn't enough to take a secure wing. This was a probe. The main force is coming from somewhere else." 2:24 a.m. He was right. Bravo team hit the service elevator shaft at the same moment. They didn't ride the elevator. They rappelled down the shaft and blew the doors on the 3rd floor with a shaped charge that sent a shockwave through the entire wing. Wallace and Petty were at the nurse's station. The blast knocked Petty off his feet and into the wall. He didn't get up. Wallace staggered, ears ringing, and raised his weapon just in time to see 6 men pour through the shattered elevator doors. He fired, dropped the first one, the second. His magazine ran dry. He reached for a reload, and a round hit him in the thigh. He went down on one knee, kept fighting, got the magazine seated, racked the bolt, fired again. But 6 on 1 with a wounded leg isn't a fight. It's a countdown. A second round hit him in the vest. The impact cracked a rib and drove the air from his lungs. He collapsed behind the nurse's station counter, gasping, trying to aim, trying to stay alive. Petty, he choked. Petty, get up. Petty wasn't moving. 2:25 a.m. Emily dropped from the ceiling vent directly behind the Bravo team. No sound, no warning. The last man in the formation never saw her. She drove the ceramic blade into the gap between his helmet and his collar, severed the spinal cord at C3, and caught his body before it hit the floor. She lowered him silently, took his suppressed MP7, checked the magazine, and moved forward. The fifth man turned. She shot him twice in the face. He fell against the wall and slid down, leaving a dark streak. The fourth man spun and fired. The rounds passed through the space where Emily had been a half-second earlier. She had already dropped to the floor, slid forward on the polished linoleum, and fired upward into his chest from 3 feet away. He crumpled. 3 down in 4 seconds. The remaining 3 Bravo team members realized something impossible was happening behind them. They turned in unison, training taking over, and opened fire down the corridor. Emily was already gone. She had rolled through the open door of an exam room, put a wall between her and the gunfire, and was now moving through the connecting door to the next room. Wallace, bleeding behind the counter, stared into the darkness. He had seen it. A figure, fast, silent, moving like nothing he had ever witnessed in his life. "Who the hell was that?" he whispered. 2:27 a.m. Donovan and Reyes were pushing down the east corridor when they heard the gunfire from the elevator shaft. Different weapons, different cadence. Someone was fighting back, and it wasn't any of his Marines. "That's not Wallace's weapon," Reyes said. "I know." "Then who is it?" Donovan didn't answer. He didn't have one. They rounded the corner and found 3 bodies. Professional military contractors. Dead. Killed with a precision that made Donovan's blood run cold. These weren't lucky shots from a panicking guard. These were surgical eliminations. Spinal, cranial, center mass. Every single one placed exactly where it needed to be. Reyes knelt beside the closest body. "Sergeant, look at this." The man's own knife had been taken from his sheath and driven through his radio. Whoever killed him didn't just neutralize the threat, they destroyed his ability to communicate. That was the work of someone who understood tactical communication interdiction. That was the work of a special operator. Donovan stood very still. His mind raced through every person in this building. Caldwell was bedridden. His Marines were accounted for. The night staff had evacuated or hidden. That left one person unaccounted for. "Where's Carter?" he said. Reyes looked at him. "The nurse? Where is she?" "Last I knew, supply room." "Go check." Reyes ran. He came back 30 seconds later, breathing hard. "Supply room's empty. Her scrubs are on the floor. Just the scrubs. Nothing else." Donovan felt something shift inside his chest. Not fear, something deeper. The sudden, sickening realization that he had been played. "She's not a nurse," he said. "What?" "Carter, she's not a nurse. She never was." 2:31 a.m. Emily was hunting. She moved through the maintenance corridors like water through pipe. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Every step calculated, every angle checked, every threat assessed and prioritized in the fraction of a second it takes a trained operator to process a combat environment. She had neutralized 7 hostiles. 23 remained, plus Klein. She needed to thin them further before they reached room 4. Caldwell was the mission. Everything else was secondary. She heard voices ahead. 2 men, speaking German. Contractors from the European circuit, probably former KSK or GSG-9. She pressed herself flat against the wall and controlled her breathing. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold, 4 counts. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. Heart rate steady at 62. Combat calm. The first man passed her position. She let him go. The second man was 2 steps behind. She grabbed him by the chin in the back of the skull and twisted. The snap echoed in the narrow corridor. He dropped. She caught his rifle before it clattered to the floor. The first man heard something, turned, saw his partner on the ground, raised his weapon. Emily was already aiming. One round, forehead. He fell backward and didn't move again. 9 down, 21 to go. She kept moving. 2:34 a.m. Klein stopped walking. He held up a fist. His team froze. Something was wrong. He had lost contact with Bravo Team 6 minutes ago. Alpha Team's probe had been repelled with casualties, and now his head count was dropping on the tactical display that Decker monitored from the mobile command post outside. "How many have we lost?" he asked over his encrypted channel. Decker's voice came back tight. 9 confirmed, 3 from Alpha, 6 from Bravo. All killed, not wounded. Whoever is doing this isn't taking prisoners. The Marines? 2 Marines engaged Alpha Team. Standard tactics. The Bravo Team casualties are different. The kill signatures are wrong.
These aren't Marine kills.
Explain. Close quarters, bladed weapons, single precision shots. Whoever is doing this has advanced CQB training. This isn't garrison security, Klein. There's an operator in that building. Klein's jaw tightened. This was not in the intelligence briefing. Their contact inside the hospital had reported 3 Marines on night shift, a wounded intelligence officer, minimal medical staff, and 1 incompetent nurse. "The nurse," Klein said. "What about her? Pull her personnel file, right now. Emily Carter, pull everything." 30 seconds of silence. Then Decker came back and his voice had changed. The confidence was gone. "Emily Carter's file is clean. Nursing degree from Johns Hopkins. 3 years at Bethesda. Unremarkable service record. But Klein, I ran her photo through our facial recognition database. The military one. The one we're not supposed to have access to. And she doesn't match any Emily Carter in the system. The face matches a different file. The file is redacted. Every page, every line. Classified at a level I've never seen before. The only thing not redacted is a unit designation." "What unit?" Decker paused. "DEVGRU." Klein stood perfectly still in the dark corridor of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and for the first time in his professional career, he felt something he had not felt since Helmand Province. Fear. "She's a SEAL," he said. "She's not just a SEAL," Decker said. "She's Ghostline." Klein knew that name. Every operator in the private military world knew that name. Ghostline was the call sign that appeared in after-action reports from Yemen, from the South China Sea, from operations so classified that even mentioning them could trigger a federal investigation. Ghostline was a ghost story that special operations commanders told to justify increased funding. Most contractors didn't believe she was real. She was real. She was in this building, and she had already killed 9 of his men. Klein made a decision in that moment, a decision that separated him from every other contractor who would have pulled back, reassessed, and reconsidered. He pressed his transmit button and said 6 words. "All teams converge. Kill everyone inside." 2:38 a.m. Emily heard the shift. She felt it in the rhythm of the footsteps above and below her. The scattered approach was gone. The probing attacks were over. Every hostile in the building was now moving toward a single point. Ward 7. They were coming all at once. Not to be surgical anymore. Not to be quiet. They were coming to overwhelm, to saturate every corridor with firepower and bodies until nothing was left alive. Emily stopped moving. She pressed her back against the cold wall of the maintenance tunnel and closed her eyes for 3 seconds. She thought about Caldwell, wounded, barely standing, holding a pistol with shaking hands. She thought about Brooks, 22 years old, scared but fighting. She thought about Donovan, arrogant, stubborn, brave Donovan, who mocked her every single day and who was right now standing between those killers and his duty, with nothing but a rifle and his refusal to quit. She thought about Wallace, bleeding behind a counter, petty, unconscious on the floor. These men didn't know her. They didn't trust her. They thought she was a joke, and she was going to save every single one of them. She opened her eyes. "All right, Klein," she whispered. "You want to converge? Then come to me." She turned and headed for the MRI suite. It was time to end this. 2:39 a.m. Emily moved through the maintenance tunnel toward the MRI suite with a clarity that most people never experience in their entire lives. Not adrenaline, not rage, something colder, something she had trained into her bones across 14 years of operations that the world would never know about. A perfect, crystalline focus that reduced the universe to angles, distances, timing, and the beating hearts of the people she had to keep alive. But she couldn't do it alone, not anymore. The math was brutal. 21 hostiles still operational, all converging on Ward 7. She had 2 captured weapons with limited ammunition. She had a ceramic blade, she had a syringe, and she had a hospital full of equipment that most people saw as medical tools, and she saw as instruments of war. She needed the Marines. She needed Donovan. And that meant burning what was left of her cover in a way that couldn't be undone. 2:40 a.m. Donovan and Reyes were pinned at the junction of the East Corridor in the main hallway. 2 contractors had taken positions behind overturned gurneys 40 feet ahead and were laying down disciplined, suppressive fire every time either Marine tried to advance. The rounds punched through drywall and sent plaster dust raining from the ceiling. Donovan fired 3 rounds, ducked back, and slammed a fresh magazine home. "We can't stay here. They're fixing us in position while the main force flanks." "So what do we do?" Reyes shouted over the gunfire. "I'm working on it." "Work faster." A voice came from behind them, calm, controlled, completely out of place. "Sergeant Donovan." Both Marines spun, rifles up, fingers on triggers. Emily stood 6 feet behind them. She was no longer wearing scrubs, no glasses, no ponytail. Her hair was pulled tight against her skull. She held a suppressed MP7 in a grip that told Donovan everything he needed to know in a single heartbeat. The way she held that weapon was wrong for a nurse. It was wrong for a civilian. It was wrong for anyone who hadn't spent years making a rifle part of their own body. "Who the hell are you?" Donovan demanded. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes, United States Navy, DevGru, call sign Ghostline. I've been embedded in this ward for 5 days undercover to protect Commander Caldwell. There are 21 hostiles remaining in this building. Their leader is Victor Klein, former British SAS, now private military. He has orders to kill Caldwell and everyone in this wing. Comms are jammed. Backup doesn't know we're under attack. We have approximately 8 minutes before his full force reaches room 4. She said it all without raising her voice, without blinking, without a single unnecessary word. Reyes stared at her like she had just told him the earth was flat. Donovan didn't move. His rifle was still pointed at her chest. His jaw was locked. Behind his eyes, she could see it happening. The recalculation. Every stumble, every dropped tray, every stammered apology. Every time he had mocked her, dismissed her, written her off as dead weight, all of it was a lie. "You're telling me," Donovan said slowly, "that you're a Navy SEAL? I'm telling you that I'm the reason 9 of those men are already dead, and if you don't lower that rifle and listen to me in the next 10 seconds, the other 21 are going to kill every person in this hallway." Donovan didn't lower his rifle. "I was told you transferred from Bethesda. I saw your personnel file. You saw what you were supposed to see. And the clumsiness, the dropping things, the apologies. Operational cover. I needed every person in this ward to ignore me. It worked. The suppressive fire from down the hall intensified. Rounds cracked past the corner, close enough that Reyes flinched and pressed himself flat against the wall. Donovan looked at Emily. He looked at the weapon in her hands. He looked at the way she stood, balanced, centered, weight on the balls of her feet, zero fear in her eyes. He lowered his rifle. "What do you need us to do?" 2:42 a.m. Emily laid out the plan in 45 seconds. No wasted words, no room for questions. Klein is converging all his remaining forces on Ward 7. He wants to overwhelm us. We can't win a straight fight against 21 operators in these corridors. So we don't fight them here, we pull them somewhere we control. Where? Reyes asked. MRI suite, 1 floor down. The 3 Tesla magnet generates a magnetic field strong enough to rip weapons from hands and pin armored men to the bore. Anyone wearing steel plate carriers, helmets, or carrying standard-issue rifles will be pulled toward the magnet with enough force to cause serious injury. Donovan shook his head. That's insane. That's physics, Sergeant. I need you and Reyes to pull back to room 4, grab Caldwell, and move him through the maintenance corridor to the fire exit on the 2nd floor. I mapped the route 4 days ago. Take the first left, then straight for 60 meters, then down the service ladder. There's a fire door at the bottom that leads to the east parking structure. And you? I'm going to make noise. Enough noise to pull Klein's entire force away from Ward 7 and down to the imaging department. When they follow me into the MRI suite, I end it. By yourself? This is what I do. Donovan stared at her. 14 years of combat experience told him this plan was reckless. 14 years of reading operators told him the woman standing in front of him was the real thing. How do we know you're not one of them? He asked. Because if I was one of them, you'd already be dead. Both of you. I've been 6 feet from you for 5 days, and you never once suspected me. If I wanted Caldwell dead, he would be dead. That landed like a hammer. Reyes exhaled hard through his nose. Donovan's eyes narrowed, but the argument was over. She was right. If she had been hostile, they would have been corpses days ago. Reyes, Donovan said, move to room 4. Get Caldwell up. Get Wallace and Petty if they can move. What about you? Donovan looked at Emily. Something passed between them. Not trust exactly. Not yet. But recognition. The kind of recognition that only comes between people who have been in the worst places in the world and survived. I'm going with her, Donovan said. Emily shook her head. Negative. I work alone. Not tonight you don't. You're in my hospital. These are my Marines. You might be the deadliest person in this building, but I'm not sending you into 21 guns by yourself while I run away. This isn't about pride, Sergeant. No, it's about the fact that your plan requires someone to cover the MRI suite entrance after you lure them in. If they flank the room, you're trapped. You need a second shooter. Emily paused. She calculated. He was right. The MRI suite had 2 access points. She could cover one. She couldn't cover both. She had planned to barricade the second entrance, but a barricade buys seconds. A Marine with a rifle buys minutes. Can you follow orders from a Navy officer? She asked. I can follow orders from someone who knows what the hell they're doing. Then strip your gear, everything metal, body armor, helmet, dog tags, belt buckle, everything. The magnetic field doesn't discriminate. If you walk into that room with steel on your body, you become a projectile. Donovan began pulling off his plate carrier. Reyes, go, now. Reyes ran. 2:45 a.m. Emily and Donovan moved fast through the maintenance corridor. Without his body armor, Donovan felt naked, exposed. 20 years of training had conditioned him to feel safe behind ceramic plates and Kevlar. Now he wore nothing but his uniform and carried his rifle, which Emily had cleared as aluminum-framed and non-ferromagnetic. Your rifle stays outside the suite, she told him. You'll hold the south entrance from the corridor. Do not cross the threshold. The field gradient starts 3 feet inside the door. Copy. When I activate the magnet, anyone inside that room wearing standard tactical gear gets pulled toward the bore. Rifles, pistols, knives, anything with ferrous metal will be ripped from their hands. Steel plate carriers will drag them across the floor. Some of them will be pinned to the machine itself. And then what? And then I handle it. Donovan glanced at her as they moved. You've done this before. I've never used an MRI as a weapon before, but I've improvised in worse situations. Worse than this? Sergeant, I once disabled a patrol boat in the South China Sea using a fire extinguisher and a roll of electrical tape. This is practically conventional. He almost laughed. Almost. 2:47 a.m. They reached the imaging department. Emily used the clone keycard, and the lock clicked open. Donovan took position at the south entrance, rifle up, eyes down the dark corridor. Emily entered the MRI suite. She moved to the control panel and powered up the system. The magnet was always on. Superconducting magnets don't shut down between scans. But the active shim coils and gradient amplifiers needed power, and the backup battery system in the imaging department was on a separate circuit from the main hospital grid. The jammers hadn't killed it. The magnet hummed. Emily felt it in her teeth. She checked the room one final time, cleared her mental map, identified the kill zones, calculated the field strength at every distance from the bore. Then she keyed the hospital's internal PA system. The PA ran on hardwired copper, not radio frequency. The jammers couldn't touch it. Her voice echoed through every corridor in the secure wing. Victor Klein, this is Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes, United States Navy. I know who you are. I know who hired you. I know about the defense contracts, the shell companies, the Senate Oversight Committee. Caldwell isn't your only problem anymore. I am. I have copies of everything, every file, every recording. If you want it, come get it. Imaging department, ground floor. I'll be waiting. She released the button. 2:48 a.m. Klein heard it, every word. Standing in the third-floor corridor, surrounded by his remaining men, he heard the voice of a woman he had dismissed as a frightened nurse cut through the darkness with the cold precision of a scalpel. Decker's voice crackled in his earpiece. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. Then we don't take it. We push to room 4. The target is Caldwell. She said she has copies. If that's true, killing Caldwell means nothing. She becomes the primary target. And if she's lying, then we kill her and go back for Caldwell. Either way, she dies first. Klein turned to his men, 18 still standing. He split them into 2 groups, 12 with him to the imaging department, 6 to hold the stairwells and prevent any escape from the upper floors. Move fast, stay tight, and do not underestimate her. She's DEVGRU. Ghost line. She has already killed 9 of us. Treat her like what she is. 2:51 a.m. Emily heard them coming. The footsteps were faster now, heavier. 12 men moving with purpose, abandoning stealth for speed. They knew she was waiting. They didn't care. They had numbers, firepower, and armor. She had a magnet. Donovan heard them too. He pressed himself tight against the wall beside the south entrance, rifle shouldered, breathing controlled. His ear was still bleeding from the graze earlier. He ignored it. 12 coming from the north corridor, he whispered. Let them come, Emily whispered back. Don't fire until they're inside the room. Every one of them needs to cross the threshold. And if they don't all come in, they will. Klein won't let his men go in without him, and he won't stand in the hallway while someone else does the work. His ego won't allow it. You know him? I know his type. Operators who go private do it because they can't stand not being the one in control. He'll come in last, behind his men, close enough to see the kill, but protected enough to survive if it goes wrong. That's his pattern. How do you know his pattern? Because I've been studying him for 3 months. This didn't start 5 days ago, Sergeant. This started the moment Caldwell was targeted in Baghdad. I was assigned to him before the assassination attempt. I was too late to stop the car bomb. I'm not too late tonight. Donovan heard something in her voice. Just a crack. Just a sliver of something that wasn't tactical. It was personal. She blamed herself for Baghdad. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. 2:53 a.m. The first of Klein's men reached the imaging department. Emily was standing in the center of the MRI suite, visible, exposed, hands at her sides, no weapon drawn. The MP7 was on the floor behind the control console, out of sight but within reach. The point man saw her and froze. He raised his rifle, laser sight centered on her chest. "Don't move." "I'm not moving," Emily said. The second man entered, then the third. They fanned out, covering angles, weapons sweeping the room. Professional, disciplined, exactly what she expected. Fourth, fifth, sixth, they kept coming. 7, 8, 9. Emily counted heartbeats, not theirs, hers. Steady, 60 beats per minute. The calm of someone who has accepted every possible outcome, including her own death, and decided to act anyway. 10, 11, one more. Klein entered last, just as she predicted. He walked through the north entrance with his weapon raised and his eyes locked on hers. For a moment, the two of them existed in a space that had nothing to do with the other men in the room. Predator and predator, each recognizing the other for exactly what they were. "Ghost line," Klein said. "Klein, you made a mistake tonight. You should have stayed hidden. You should have let them die and escape with the files. That's the difference between you and me. I don't leave people behind. That's not a difference. That's a weakness. 12 of you walked into a room I chose, in a building I've mapped, standing inside a machine I control. Tell me again which one of us is weak." Klein's eyes moved. For the first time, he looked at the room itself, really looked at it. The massive bore of the MRI machine, the control panel, the walls lined with warning signs about magnetic fields and metallic objects. His face changed. "Get out," he barked. "Everyone out, now." Too late. Emily dropped to the floor and hit the emergency gradient pulse sequence she had pre-programmed on the control panel using a wireless trigger taped to her palm. The 3 Tesla magnet surged. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Rifles ripped from hands. Pistols flew across the room like missiles. Steel-plated body armor dragged men across the polished floor toward the bore, their boots squealing against tile as they fought a force they couldn't see and couldn't resist. Helmets slammed against the machine with metallic clangs that sounded like bells in a cathedral. One man's plate carrier pinned him face first against the bore, his arms splayed, his legs kicking uselessly, screaming, confusion, panic. Men who had breached buildings, killed targets, survived firefights across 6 continents were now helpless. Their training meant nothing. Their weapons were gone. Their armor had become their prison. Emily rolled behind the control console, grabbed the MP7, and came up firing. 1, 2, 3. Controlled shots, each one placed in the gaps between armor plates that were now pulled tight against the magnet. Exposed flesh, necks, inner thighs, armpits. She hit what the magnet revealed. Donovan opened fire from the south entrance, dropping 2 men who had been pulled off balance but not fully pinned. His rounds caught them center mass as they stumbled, arms flailing, trying to grab weapons that were no longer in their hands. In 8 seconds, it was over for 9 of the 12. 3 remained. Klein, Decker, who had followed his commander despite orders to hold the perimeter, and one other, a massive Russian contractor who had been standing near the edge of the field gradient and caught only a partial pull. He had shed his armor fast enough to avoid being pinned, and now he charged Emily with nothing but his hands. Emily sidestepped. The Russian was fast for his size, but she was faster. She drove her knee into his thigh, collapsing his leg, then hammered an elbow into his temple as he dropped. He hit the floor hard. She stomped on his wrist as he reached for a knife that had been pulled 3 feet away by the magnet. He screamed. She kicked the knife away and put a round through his shoulder. He stopped moving. Decker tried to run. Donovan shot him twice in the back. He fell in the doorway and didn't get up. That left Klein. 2:55 a.m. Klein had been smart enough to shed his plate carrier the instant the magnet engaged. He was strong enough and fast enough to resist the pull on his sidearm, letting it rip free rather than fighting it. Now he stood on the far side of the room, unarmed, watching Emily Hayes with the expression of a man who has just realized that the hunt he began 3 hours ago has ended in a cage. It's over, Klein. Is it? He moved before she could fire, closed the distance in 2 strides, knocked the MP7 from her hands with a strike to her wrist that sent lightning up her arm. The weapon skittered across the floor. Close quarters, no weapons, no rules. Klein was 6'2", 220, 12 years SAS. He fought like a machine designed to break human bodies. He threw a combination that would have killed a lesser fighter. Elbow strike to the jaw, knee to the ribs, headbutt aimed at the bridge of her nose. Emily absorbed the elbow, slipped the knee, caught the headbutt on her forearm and felt the bones shudder. Pain shot from wrist to shoulder. She ignored it. She countered with a palm strike to his throat that made him gag, followed with a knee to his groin that buckled him forward, then drove her forehead into his nose. Cartilage cracked, blood sprayed. Klein staggered, spat blood, smiled. "You're good," he said, "but you're small." He grabbed her by the throat with one hand and lifted. Emily's feet left the ground. Her vision went gray at the edges. She felt her trachea compress and her body scream for air. She didn't panic. She reached behind her, to the small of her back where the syringe had been tucked since the beginning of the night. Her fingers found it, gripped it, pulled the cap with her thumb, and drove the needle into the side of Victor Klein's neck. Succinylcholine, fast-acting depolarizing neuromuscular blocker. Onset in 30 to 60 seconds. Complete skeletal muscle paralysis. Klein felt the sting, felt the plunger depress. His eyes went wide. He dropped Emily and grabbed at his neck, pulling the syringe free, but the drug was already in his bloodstream. "What did you give me?" he demanded. Emily landed on her feet, coughing, gasping, one hand on her bruised throat. She looked at him with eyes that held no mercy and no satisfaction. Just the cold arithmetic of someone who had calculated every possible ending and chosen the one where the enemy stopped breathing on her terms. "Paralytic," she said. "You have about 45 seconds before your voluntary muscles stop responding. Your diaphragm will follow. You'll be fully conscious, but unable to move or breathe. In 3 minutes, you'll be brain dead." Klein lunged at her. His right leg gave out. He stumbled, caught himself on the MRI machine. His left hand was shaking now. His fingers wouldn't close. "Unless someone intubates you," Emily continued, "puts a tube down your throat and breathes for you. A nurse could do it, the kind of nurse you thought was too clumsy to matter." Klein's knees hit the floor. His arms went limp at his sides. His chest heaved as his respiratory muscles began to fail. His mouth opened and closed, trying to form words, but his tongue wouldn't cooperate. Emily knelt in front of him. She looked into his eyes, and he looked into hers. And in that moment, he understood something that he would carry into whatever darkness was coming for him. She could save him. She could let him die. And the choice was entirely hers. "Donovan," she called without looking away from Klein. "I need an intubation kit from the crash cart in the hallway. Now." Donovan didn't ask why. He ran. Emily watched Klein's eyes fill with terror. The great Victor Klein, former SAS, professional killer, commander of 30 mercenaries, reduced to a paralyzed man on his knees, unable to move, unable to breathe, kept alive only by the mercy of the woman he had come to kill. "You're going to testify," she told him. "You're going to name every person who hired you, every senator, every general, every contractor. You're going to do it because I'm going to save your life right now, and you're going to spend the rest of it knowing that you owe every breath to the clumsy nurse from Ward 7. Klein's eyes rolled. His chest stopped moving. Donovan arrived with the intubation kit. Emily grabbed it, tilted Klein's head back, inserted the laryngoscope, and threaded the endotracheal tube into his trachea in under 15 seconds. She connected the bag valve mask and began manually ventilating. Klein's chest rose and fell. He was alive. Paralyzed, humiliated, defeated, but alive. Donovan stood over them both, breathing hard, blood on his face, and stared at the woman who had just single-handedly neutralized a private military assault on a United States military hospital. "You saved him," he said. "After everything he did, you saved him." "Dead men can't testify, Sergeant." "Is that the only reason?" Emily didn't answer. She kept squeezing the bag. One breath, two, three, rhythmic, controlled. The same hands that had killed 9 men tonight were now keeping the 10th alive. Donovan looked at her for a long time. "You're not what I thought you were," he said. "Nobody ever is." 2:58 a.m. The building was not yet secure. 6 of Klein's men still held the stairwells. Wallace was bleeding out behind the nurse's station. Petty was unconscious with a possible skull fracture. Reyes was somewhere in the maintenance corridors with a wounded Commander Caldwell who could barely walk. And Emily Hayes was kneeling on the floor of an MRI suite, manually breathing for a man who had tried to kill her, surrounded by the bodies of his soldiers, with a bruised throat, a possibly fractured forearm, and ammunition she could count on one hand. The fight wasn't over, but the balance had shifted. And somewhere outside these walls, racing toward Walter Reed with sirens and fury, the real quick reaction force was finally on its way. Emily didn't know that yet. She only knew what was in front of her. One breath at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one enemy neutralized, 20 more to account for, and a man in room 4 whose testimony could bring down an empire. She squeezed the bag. She kept Klein breathing, and she waited for what came next. 2:59 a.m. Emily squeezed the bag valve mask one more time, watched Klein's chest rise, and made a decision. She couldn't stay here. Klein was paralyzed, pinned by circumstance and chemistry, but 6 of his men were still operational in this building. Wallace was bleeding. Petty was down. Reyes was alone with a wounded man who could barely stand. Every second she spent on this floor keeping a killer alive was a second those Marines were dying without her. She looked at Donovan. "I need you to take over ventilation." "I'm a Marine, not a medic." "Squeeze the bag once every 5 seconds. That's it. Keep his chest moving. If you stop, he dies, and we lose the only witness who can bring down the people behind this." Donovan knelt beside Klein and took the bag. His hands dwarfed it. He squeezed. Klein's chest rose. "Like that?" he asked. "Exactly like that. Don't stop. Don't leave this room. I'll come back for you." "Where are you going?" "To finish this." She picked up the MP7, checked the magazine, 7 rounds. She pulled a pistol from one of the dead contractors near the bore. Glock 19. 14 rounds in the magazine, plus 1 in the chamber. She press-checked it, confirmed the round, and tucked it into her waistband. 22 rounds total against 6 trained killers. She had worked with less. "Hayes," Donovan said. She stopped at the door. "Come back alive. That's an order." "You can't give me orders, Sergeant. I outrank you." "Then consider it a request." She almost smiled. Almost. Then she was gone. 3:01 a.m. Reyes was lost. Not physically. He had followed Emily's instructions perfectly. First left in the maintenance corridor, straight for 60 meters, down the service ladder. But Commander Caldwell was fading. The man had lost blood during the move. His left side was soaked through the bandages, and every step produced a sound from his throat that wasn't quite a groan and wasn't quite a gasp. Something between the two. The sound of a body that was finished pretending it could keep going. "Sir, I need you to stay with me." "I'm with you, Corporal. Just move." "We're almost at the fire door." "How far?" 30 meters. Caldwell's knees buckled. Reyes caught him, threw the commander's arm over his shoulder, and half carried, half dragged him forward. Caldwell weighed 190 pounds. Reyes weighed 160. The math was bad, but Reyes was 23 years old and terrified, and fear is the strongest muscle in the human body. "Sir, talk to me. Stay conscious." "I'm conscious," I'm thinking. "About what?" "About who inside this hospital sold us out." Reyes kept moving. "You think it's someone here, not outside?" The kill team had our radio frequencies, our rotation schedule, our backup generator codes. That information doesn't live on a server somewhere. It lives in the heads of people who work in this building. Someone in this hospital gave them everything they needed. "Who?" Caldwell coughed. Blood flecked his lips. "That's what I've been trying to figure out for 5 days. Lying in that bed, watching everyone who walked in and out. The doctors, the Marines, the nurses." "The nurses?" Carter was the only new variable. New transfer. No history with the ward. Convenient timing. I suspected her first. "She's not a nurse, sir. She's Navy. DevGru." Caldwell stopped moving. Reyes felt the commander's weight shift, his body going rigid despite the pain. "What did you say?" "The nurse, Carter. Her real name is Hayes, Lieutenant Commander. She's been undercover this whole time. She's the one who's been killing the hostiles." Caldwell was silent for 5 full seconds. When he spoke, his voice had changed. The pain was still there, but something else had pushed through it, something sharp and dangerous. "If they sent DevGru to protect me, then the threat assessment was higher than anyone told me. This isn't just a kill team, Corporal. This is a sanctioned operation." Someone with serious clearance authorized Klein's assault, and someone with even higher clearance sent Hayes to counter it. We're standing in the middle of a war between 2 factions of our own government. Reyes felt his stomach drop. "Sir, with all due respect, I just need to get you to that fire door." "And then what? Who's on the other side of that door? More of Klein's people? Fake military police? We don't know who to trust." "We trust Hayes. We trust no one until I see credentials, authorization codes, and a face I recognize from naval intelligence. Keep moving." 3:04 a.m. Emily reached the 3rd floor through a ventilation shaft that would have been impossible for anyone without her training to navigate. She emerged in the ceiling space above the east stairwell and looked down through a gap in the panels. 2 of Klein's remaining 6 men held the stairwell. They were positioned well. One at the top of the stairs, one at the landing, covering both up and down approaches. Disciplined spacing. Clear sight lines. These weren't the ones who panicked in the MRI suite. These were the ones Klein had trusted to hold the perimeter. Emily studied them for 8 seconds. She identified their weapons, their armor type, their communication equipment, their blind spots. The one at the top was right-handed, rifle shouldered on the right. His left side was partially exposed. The one on the landing was using a pillar for cover, but his feet were visible beneath it. 2 targets, limited ammunition, no room for misses. She dropped from the ceiling. The first man never turned. She landed behind him, wrapped her left arm around his throat, and drove the ceramic blade through the base of his skull with her right hand. He went limp instantly. She lowered his body and used it as a shield as the second man opened fire from the landing. 3 rounds hit the dead man's vest. Emily felt the impacts through the body but held firm. She drew the Glock from her waistband, leaned around the corpse, and fired twice. The first round hit the pillar. The second found the gap. The man's leg buckled and he went down on one knee, exposed. Emily fired again, center mass. He fell backward down the stairs and didn't move. 12 rounds remaining, 4 hostiles left. 3:06 a.m. Wallace was dying. He knew it. He could feel it in the way his thoughts were getting soft at the edges, like wet paper dissolving in water. The bullet in his thigh had hit the femoral artery, and despite the tourniquet he had improvised from his own belt, blood was pooling beneath him on the floor of the nurse's station. Petty was beside him now, conscious, barely. The blast from the elevator breach had given him a severe concussion, and his eyes couldn't focus on anything for more than a second. But he was awake, and he was holding Wallace's hand. And neither of them was talking about that because Marines don't talk about holding hands, even when one of them is bleeding to death. Petty, yeah, if I don't make it, tell my daughter I wasn't scared. You're going to make it. Tell her I did my job. Tell her I didn't run. Wallace, shut up. You're not dying in a hospital. That's the stupidest place to die. Wallace laughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. But he laughed because Petty was right. Dying in a hospital was stupid. Dying in a hospital during an armed assault while bleeding on the floor behind a nurse's station because you didn't have enough Marines on your fire team was even stupider. Where's the nurse? Wallace asked. Which nurse? Carter, the clumsy one. I don't know. Haven't seen her since the lights went out. Wallace closed his eyes. He was tired. So tired. The blood loss was pulling him towards sleep, and sleep was pulling him towards something deeper, and he was running out of reasons to fight it. Then he heard footsteps, fast, coming from the east corridor. His hand found his rifle. He raised it with arms that felt like they were filled with sand. The barrel wavered. His vision blurred. A figure appeared in the darkness. Don't shoot! It was Emily. She dropped beside Wallace and immediately assessed his wound. Her hands moved with a speed and precision that had nothing to do with the fumbling nurse they had known. She tightened the tourniquet, packed the wound with gauze from the station's emergency kit, and applied direct pressure with both hands. You're going to be fine, Wallace. Who are you? Someone who isn't going to let you die. That's not an answer. My name is Hayes, Lieutenant Commander, Navy. I've been undercover in this ward. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry about all of it. Wallace stared at her through fading eyes. The nurse. Yeah, the nurse. You dropped trays on purpose. Every single one. He tried to laugh again. Couldn't. The pain was too much. Donovan is going to lose his mind. Donovan already knows. He's downstairs keeping a prisoner alive. A prisoner? Klein, the man who led the assault. He's paralyzed and intubated. He's going to testify against everyone who sent him. Wallace let his head fall back against the counter. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard, and I once watched a lance corporal try to fight a camel in Kuwait. Emily almost smiled, but her hands were covered in Wallace's blood, and the tourniquet was barely holding, and she could feel his pulse weakening under her fingers. He needed surgery. He needed a real trauma team, not a SEAL operator with gauze and pressure. Petty, she said, can you apply pressure here? Both hands, hard. Don't let up. Petty crawled over, placed his hands where Emily's had been, and pressed down. Wallace groaned. Keep him talking, Emily said. Keep him awake. If he closes his eyes, slap him. Where are you going? There are 4 more out there. I need to clear this building before anyone else gets hurt. She stood. Her hands were red to the wrists. She wiped them on her pants and picked up the Glock. 3:09 a.m. 2 of the remaining 4 hostiles had abandoned their positions. Emily found their posts empty at the west stairwell. Abandoned equipment, discarded radios. They had heard what happened in the MRI suite. They had lost contact with Klein. They had done the math and decided that no paycheck was worth what was happening inside this building. They were running. Emily let them go. Fleeing contractors were a problem for the perimeter security and the QRF. Her priority was the 2 who hadn't run. She found them outside room 4. They had figured it out. With Klein's main force destroyed and the stairwells compromised, the only play left was the original mission. Kill Caldwell. If they couldn't escape with their lives, they would at least complete the contract. Except room 4 was empty. Caldwell was gone. Reyes had moved him through the maintenance corridors exactly as Emily had instructed. The 2 contractors were standing in the empty room, confused and furious. One of them was shouting into his dead radio. The other was tearing through cabinets, looking for anything that would tell him where the target had been moved. Emily stood in the doorway. He's not here. Both men spun, weapons up. "Your ghost line," the first one said. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wide. Not with anger, with fear. The fear of a man who has spent the last hour listening to his teammates die one by one and knows he's next. "Drop your weapons," Emily said. "Get on your knees, hands behind your heads. This is over." "Nothing is over. We have 6 men outside this building. Reinforcements are coming." "No, they're not. Your perimeter team abandoned you 9 minutes ago. Decker is dead. Klein is paralyzed on the floor of the MRI suite. You are the last 2 standing in a building that is about to be flooded with United States Marines. You have about 3 minutes to decide if you want to spend the rest of your lives in a federal prison or in a grave." The second contractor looked at the first. Something passed between them. A calculation, a weighing of odds. They had been soldiers once, in other countries, in other wars. They knew when a fight was lost. The first man lowered his weapon, placed it on the floor, knelt. The second man didn't. He raised his rifle and fired. Emily was already moving. She threw herself sideways, felt the round pass close enough to pull at her shirt, and returned fire from the floor. 2 shots. Both hit. The man staggered backward, hit the wall, and slid down, leaving a dark smear. His rifle clattered to the floor. The first contractor stayed on his knees, hands behind his head, eyes squeezed shut. Emily stood up, checked the downed man. Dead. Checked her magazine. 8 rounds remaining. 1 prisoner. 1 body. 28 of Klein's 30 men accounted for. 2 runners who would be picked up by the QRF. She zip-tied the prisoner's wrists with a cable she pulled from a medical monitor and left him face down on the floor of room 4. 3:12 a.m. She found Reyes and Caldwell in the basement, 20 feet from the fire door. Caldwell was on the ground, conscious but gray. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Reyes was beside him, one hand on his shoulder, the other holding his rifle, eyes locked on the darkness ahead. "Commander," Emily said, "it's Hayes." Caldwell opened his eyes. "Status: Klein is neutralized. His force is destroyed. 28 of 30 accounted for. 2 fled the perimeter. Wallace is wounded but stable. Petty has a concussion. Donovan is uninjured. The building is effectively cleared." Caldwell studied her face. Even now, even with his blood pressure dropping and his body shutting down, his intelligence training wouldn't let him stop reading people. "You were the nurse," he said. "Yes, sir." "You suspected there was a mole inside this hospital?" "Yes, sir. That's one of the reasons I was placed here." "Did you find them?" Emily paused. This was the moment she had been dreading more than the firefight, more than Klein, more than the MRI suite. "Yes, sir, I found the mole." "Who?" "Captain Richard Graves, your attending physician. He's been feeding operational details to Klein's handlers for the past 3 weeks. Security rotations, radio frequencies, backup generator codes. Everything Klein needed to plan this assault came from Graves." Reyes looked like he had been punched. "Graves? The doctor? He's the one who cleared me for this rotation. He's the one who briefed us on Caldwell's security requirements. He's also the one who approved my transfer to Ward 7 without questioning it. That was a red flag. A doctor responsible for a high-value patient security should have pushed back on an unvetted staff addition. He didn't because he already knew who I was supposed to be, not who I actually was. He thought I was a real nurse, placed here through normal channels. But his lack of resistance told me he had already been compromised. He expected the ward to be soft. He wanted it soft. Caldwell closed his eyes. Graves sat at my bedside every morning, checked my vitals, told me I was recovering well, and the whole time he was counting down the clock to my murder. Yes, sir. Where is he now? Home, off duty tonight. He specifically arranged to be absent during the night shift. Standard protocol for an inside man. Create distance from the event. He won't run? He doesn't know the assault has failed. Klein's communication system is jammed both ways. Graves will wake up tomorrow expecting to hear that you're dead. Instead, he'll find federal agents at his door. Caldwell let out a breath that sounded like it carried 20 years of exhaustion. How long have you known about Graves? I confirmed it on my third night. He left a personal phone in his office unlocked. I accessed it during one of my accidental wanderings. There were encrypted messages to a number routed through 3 international proxies. The content was coded, but the timing correlated perfectly with every security change in this ward. You've had 3 days of evidence and you didn't report it. I couldn't report it without compromising my cover, and I couldn't compromise my cover without alerting Graves. And I couldn't alert Graves without tipping off Klein that the operation was blown. The only play was to let it happen. Let Klein come. Let Graves believe he was safe, and take them all at once. Caldwell stared at her for a long time. You used yourself as bait. I used the entire ward as a trap, sir, including your Marines, including you. And if it had gone wrong, if Klein's men had breached room 4 before you could stop them, then I would have died in that hallway with your Marines, sir. That was always an acceptable outcome. Reyes looked at her, really looked at her. Not the way he had looked at Nurse Carter, with pity and dismissal. He looked at her the way you look at someone when you realize they were willing to die for you, and you never even knew their name. Thank you, he said. It was quiet, simple. 2 words that meant everything. Emily nodded. 03:15 a.m. The fire door burst open. Light flooded the basement, blinding after hours of darkness. Emily shielded her eyes and raised the Glock, then froze. Uniforms. Real uniforms. Marine combat utilities. Helmets with correct unit markings. Rifles with standard-issue optics. And at the front, a face she recognized. Master Sergeant Tom Rivera. Quick Reaction Force, Marine Corps Base Quantico. She had studied his file before the operation. 30 years of service. 2 silver stars. The kind of Marine who slept with one eye open and trusted nobody until they bled in front of him. Identify yourself, Rivera shouted. Emily lowered her weapon. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes, DEVGRU. Authentication code Sierra 77 Tango Foxtrot. The building is largely secure. 28 hostiles neutralized. 2 fleeing on foot, heading east from the perimeter. The target, Commander Caldwell, is here. He needs immediate surgical evacuation. I have a critical wounded Marine on the 3rd floor, Corporal Wallace, femoral artery bleed, tourniquet in place. A 2nd Marine with a concussion, and a high-value prisoner in the MRI suite, ground floor, currently paralyzed and on manual ventilation. Sergeant Donovan is with him. The prisoner is Victor Klein. He will cooperate. Rivera stared at her. He took in the blood on her hands, the bruises on her throat, the weapon at her side. The calm, steady voice that didn't waver despite the fact that she had just single-handedly dismantled a 30-man assault force. He keyed his radio. QRF actual, building is code green. I need a trauma team to 3rd floor immediately. Secure the MRI suite, ground floor. 2 runners heading east on foot. Intercept and contain. And get me a direct line to JSOC, right now. He looked back at Emily. Commander Hayes, you want to tell me what the hell happened in here tonight? Read the after-action report, Master Sergeant. Right now, I need you to get this man into surgery before he bleeds out on your boots. Rivera looked at Caldwell, looked at Reyes, looked at the dark corridor behind them, and at the bodies that his team was already discovering on the floors above. Medic, he called. Get Commander Caldwell on a stretcher. Move. 3:18 a.m. They carried Caldwell out on a stretcher. Reyes walked beside him, one hand on the commander's shoulder, refusing to let go, even though his own legs were shaking so badly he could barely walk straight. Emily followed them into the light, real light, floodlights from military vehicles that had surrounded the hospital, red and blue flashes from ambulances. the sound of helicopters overhead, the organized chaos of a military response that should have arrived an hour ago, but was here now, finally, filling the silence with noise and the darkness with light. She walked past 2 squads of Marines securing the perimeter. She walked past a medical team rushing toward the entrance. She walked past a communications truck where technicians were already working to unjam the frequencies that Klein's equipment had blocked. Nobody stopped her. Nobody recognized her. She was just another bloodied figure in a night full of them. She found a wall, leaned against it, let her head fall back. For the first time in 3 hours, she let herself breathe. Not tactical breathing, not controlled respiration designed to maintain combat heart rate, just breathing. The kind of breathing that happens when the human body finally acknowledges that it almost died and the adrenaline starts to withdraw and the shaking starts. Her hands trembled. Her left forearm throbbed where Klein's headbutt had landed. Her throat ached where his fingers had closed around it. Her knees felt like they were made of water. She closed her eyes and saw the faces, every one of them. The man she had killed with the ceramic blade, the ones she had shot in the MRI suite, the Russian whose shoulder she had destroyed. Klein on his knees, paralyzed, gasping, eyes rolling in terror. 15 men. She had killed 15 men tonight. She would carry each of them, not with guilt, not with pride, with the weight that every operator carries, the weight that never gets lighter, no matter how many times you pick it up. 3:22 a.m. Donovan emerged from the building flanked by 2 QRF Marines and a medical team pushing a gurney. Klein was on it, intubated, restrained, alive. Donovan had kept the bag pumping for 23 straight minutes. His hands were cramped and his arms were burning, but he had not stopped. Not once. He saw Emily against the wall and walked over. His face was covered in dried blood from the graze wound on his ear. His uniform was torn. His body armor was somewhere on the floor of the MRI suite, pinned to a multi-million-dollar machine by a magnetic field that wouldn't be deactivated for another 6 hours. He stood beside her, leaned against the same wall, said nothing for a long time. Then he spoke. "I mocked you every day. You did. I called you a liability. You did. I said you'd trip over your own shadow in a firefight. I remember." Donovan turned his head and looked at her. "I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry." Emily opened her eyes and looked at him. In the flashing red and blue light, she saw a man who had fought through the darkest night of his life and come out the other side changed. Not broken, changed. The way only combat can change a person. The way only humility can change a man who thought he had nothing left to learn. "You held that bag for 23 minutes, she said. "Klein is alive because of you. Caldwell is alive because your Marines held their positions when everything went dark and the world fell apart around them. I set the trap, Sergeant, but you and your team walked into hell to help me spring it. That's generous. That's accurate." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "My daughter is 17. She wants to join the Navy. I keep telling her it's no place for a woman." Emily looked at him. "I'm not going to tell her that anymore." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Some things don't require words. They just require someone being brave enough to say them out loud. 3:25 a.m. Across the parking lot, in the back of an armored vehicle, Commander Caldwell lay on a stretcher while a trauma surgeon worked to stabilize his reopened wounds. Reyes stood outside the vehicle, finally allowing himself to sit on the bumper and put his head in his hands. Brooks appeared, limping, a bandage around his left arm where a fragment had caught him during the initial breach. He sat beside Reyes without a word. They sat together in the noise and the light, 2 young Marines who had survived something that would define the rest of their lives. "Reyes, yeah. Did that really just happen?" "Yeah." "A Navy SEAL was our nurse?" "Yeah. And she killed like 15 guys with a syringe and a magnet?" "Among other things." Brooks leaned back and stared at the sky. Dawn was coming. A thin line of gray on the eastern horizon, pushing back the darkness that had almost swallowed them all. "I helped her pick up a tray once," he said. "She dropped medical instruments all over the floor, and I bent down to help her pick them up. Donovan told me not to." "Yeah. She thanked me. She said it was kind." Reyes looked at him. So I just wanted on the record that I was the only one in this entire building who was nice to the Navy SEAL." Reyes stared at him for a long second. Then he laughed. Loud. The kind of laugh that comes from exhaustion and relief, and the sheer absurdity of being alive when you shouldn't be. Brooks laughed too, and for a moment, in the middle of all that chaos, two Marines sat on the bumper of an armored vehicle and laughed until their ribs hurt. Because sometimes that's all you can do when the world tries to kill you and fails. 3:26 a.m. The laughter died when the second convoy arrived. Brooks saw it first. 3 black Suburbans with government plates, no sirens, no lights, rolling through the military cordon like the cordon didn't exist. The QRF Marines at the perimeter checkpoint stepped aside without being asked. Nobody steps aside without being asked unless they've been told to by someone who outranks everyone on the ground. Reyes stood up. "Who is that?" Brooks shook his head. "Nobody good." The Suburbans stopped in a line. Doors opened. Men and women in civilian clothes stepped out, and every single one of them moved with the quiet authority of people who operated above the chain of command that governed normal military life. No rank insignia, no unit patches, no identification visible anywhere. One man walked ahead of the rest, tall, gray hair cut short, a face that looked like it had been carved from decades of decisions that other people would never know about. He wore a dark suit and no tie, and he crossed the parking lot with the kind of walk that said he owned every square foot of ground beneath his shoes. He stopped in front of Master Sergeant Rivera. "Where is Commander Hayes?" Rivera didn't ask who he was. Rivera already knew. You don't spend 30 years in the Marine Corps without learning to recognize the people who exist above the system. "Against the south wall, sir. She's with Sergeant Donovan." The man in the suit walked toward Emily. His team followed at a distance, fanning out, already taking control of the scene without raising a single voice. One of them intercepted the ambulance carrying Klein and redirected it to a separate staging area. Another began collecting weapons and equipment from the dead contractors. A third approached the communications truck and handed the technicians a classified frequency card that would connect them directly to the Pentagon. Emily saw him coming. She straightened against the wall. The exhaustion didn't leave her face, but something else arrived. A formality, a recognition. She knew this man. "Director Harmon," she said. "Commander Hayes." He stopped 3 feet from her and studied her the way a general studies a battlefield after the smoke clears, taking inventory, measuring damage, calculating cost. "Report," he said. 30 hostile contractors, 28 neutralized on site, 2 fled on foot, currently being pursued by QRF. Leader Victor Klein is alive, paralyzed with succinylcholine, intubated and in custody. He will cooperate. The internal source has been identified as Captain Richard Graves, attending physician Walter Reed. He is currently off-site and unaware the operation has failed. Commander Caldwell is alive and en route to emergency surgery. 4 Marines sustained injuries. Corporal Wallace is critical with a femoral artery wound. Private Petty has a concussion. Private Brooks and Sergeant Donovan sustained minor injuries. "And you?" "Functional." Harmon looked at her throat. The bruises from Klein's grip were already darkening to purple. He looked at her left forearm, which she was holding slightly away from her body because the pain was constant now. He looked at her hands, still stained with Wallace's blood. "Functional," he repeated. "You killed 15 men tonight, Commander." "Yes, sir." "You used a hospital MRI machine as a weapon." "Yes, sir." "You exposed your cover, engaged a 30-man assault force with no backup, no body armor, and limited ammunition. And you did it while simultaneously protecting a high-value intelligence asset and 4 United States Marines who didn't know you existed. They knew I existed, sir. They just didn't know who I was. Harmon almost smiled. He didn't. Men like Harmon hadn't smiled since the Cold War, and even then it was probably classified. Graves will be taken into custody within the hour. We've had a surveillance team on him since you transmitted your initial findings 4 days ago. He doesn't know it. He'll wake up to federal agents and spend the rest of his morning learning how small a prison cell can be. And the people above Graves? The contractors? The senators? Caldwell's testimony, combined with Klein's cooperation, gives us enough to dismantle the entire network. Congressional hearings will be scheduled within the week. Classified, but real. The people who paid for tonight are going to discover that the price of treason is substantially higher than they budgeted for. Emily nodded. She should have felt satisfaction. She should have felt relief. She felt neither. She felt tired. Bone deep, soul deep tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix because it lives in a place that rest can't reach. Sir, I'd like to check on my Marines before I debrief. Harmon raised an eyebrow. Your Marines? The men I was embedded with. Wallace needs surgery. Brooks took shrapnel. Petty might have a skull fracture. I want to see them. Commander, you were assigned to protect Caldwell. The Marines were incidental to the mission. Emily looked at Harmon with an expression that would have made most flag officers uncomfortable. It wasn't defiance. It was something harder to argue with. Conviction. Nothing about those men was incidental, sir. They fought tonight without knowing what they were fighting or why. They held their positions in the dark against an enemy they couldn't see, with no communications and no backup. Because that's what Marines do. Wallace nearly bled out defending a nurse's station. Petty took a blast meant for all of them. Brooks held room 4 alone with nothing but a rifle and orders from a commander who could barely stand. They were not incidental. They were the reason this mission succeeded. Harmon studied her for a long time. Whatever he saw in her eyes, it settled something for him. Go see your people, Commander. Debrief at 0600. Yes, sir. She pushed off the wall and walked toward the ambulances, and Harmon watched her go with the expression of a man who had spent 40 years in intelligence and could still be surprised by the capacity of a single human being. 3:34 a.m. Wallace was in surgery by the time Emily reached the medical tent. A field trauma team had stabilized him on site and transferred him to the operating theater that the hospital's emergency staff had set up in the East Wing, which had been untouched by the assault. The femoral repair would take hours. The surgeon told Reyes that Wallace had lost enough blood to kill most men twice, but his heart was still beating, and as long as his heart was beating, there was a chance. Reyes relayed this to Emily outside the tent. His face was gray. His hands were still shaking. He's going to make it, Emily said. You don't know that. I know that I packed that wound with enough hemostatic gauze to stop a severed limb from bleeding. And I know that the tourniquet I adjusted bought him the 20 minutes he needed to reach the surgical team. He's going to make it because I didn't let him die on that floor, and the surgeon in there isn't going to let him die on the table. Reyes looked at her. His eyes were wet. He blinked it away fast, the way young Marines do when they're terrified of being seen as anything other than strong. I carried Caldwell through those tunnels, he said. The whole time I kept thinking, if they come, if they find us, I'm not enough. I'm one Marine with a rifle and a wounded man who can't walk. I'm not enough. You were enough, Corporal. Caldwell is alive because you carried him, not because of me, not because of DEVGRU, because a 23-year-old Marine put a man on his shoulders and walked through the dark and didn't stop. Reyes pressed his lips together and nodded. He didn't trust his voice. Emily put her hand on his shoulder, firm, brief, the kind of touch that says more than words because it comes from someone who understands exactly what you're carrying. Then she walked away. 3:41 a.m. Petty was sitting on a gurney outside the medical tent, holding an ice pack to his head and arguing with a medic who wanted him to lie down. "I'm fine. It's a headache. I've had worse headaches from cheap tequila." "Sir, you have a grade 3 concussion. You need to stay horizontal." "I need to find my guys. Where's Wallace? Where's Donovan?" Emily appeared beside the gurney. Petty looked up at her and frowned. He squinted. Recognition came slowly through the fog of his concussion.
Carter? Hayes, what happened to your glasses?
They weren't real. Petty blinked again. The concussion made everything 3 seconds slower than it should have been. "You're not the nurse." "I was never the nurse." "Then who the hell changed my IV on Tuesday?" "That was real. I'm a qualified combat medic in addition to everything else." "Everything else being what, exactly?" "Navy SEAL." Petty stared at her. Then he looked at the medic. "Did she just say she's a Navy SEAL?" The medic shrugged. "Sir, I really need you to lie down." "I'm not lying down until someone explains to me how the woman who spilled apple juice on my boots last Wednesday is a Navy SEAL." Emily leaned close. "Petty, lie down. That's an order from a lieutenant commander. When your head stops spinning, I'll explain everything. Right now, your brain is swelling, and you need to let these people help you." Petty looked at her. Even through the concussion haze, he recognized authority when he heard it. Real authority. Not the nervous, apologetic voice of Nurse Carter. The steady, unyielding command of someone who had led men in places darker than this. He lay down. "The apple juice thing was on purpose, wasn't it?" he muttered. "Good night, Petty." 4:02 a.m. Brooks was sitting alone on the back step of an ambulance when Emily found him. His arm was bandaged. His rifle was across his knees. He was staring at nothing. She sat beside him. Neither of them spoke for a while. "You knew," Emily said finally. "Didn't you?" Brooks turned his head. "Knew what?" "You suspected something. That first night, when you helped me pick up the tray, you were the only one who didn't look at me with contempt. You treated me like a person. That was either kindness or instinct." "It was kindness. I didn't know anything." "Then thank you for the kindness." Brooks was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When the lights went out, I was scared. I want you to know that. I was scared out of my mind. Donovan was shouting orders, and Reyes was checking comms, and I was standing outside room 4 with my rifle, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. I kept thinking, I'm 22. I'm not ready for this. I'm not trained for this." "You held that room, Brooks." "Barely." "There's no barely in combat. You held it or you didn't. You held it. Caldwell is alive because you stood at that door and didn't leave." "I thought about leaving." "Everyone thinks about leaving. The ones who matter are the ones who stay." Brooks looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment the distance between a 22-year-old private and a decorated SEAL operator collapsed into something very simple. Two people who had survived the worst night of their lives, sitting on the steps of an ambulance, watching the dawn come. "You're not going to be around after this, are you?" he asked. "No." "Classified?" "Everything about me is classified. After the debrief, I go back to a life that doesn't officially exist. You'll be told not to talk about tonight. Most of the details will be sealed. If anyone asks about the assault on Walter Reed, the official story will be that it was a coordinated security response by Marine forces on site." "That's not what happened." "No, but that's what the record will say." "And you're okay with that?" Emily looked at the horizon. The gray line had become gold. Dawn was breaking over Walter Reed, and the light was catching the windows of the buildings she had fought through, floor by floor, life by life, in a darkness that already felt like it belonged to a different world. "I didn't do this for the record, Brooks. I did it because a man in a hospital bed was going to be murdered, and 4 Marines were going to die protecting him, and I was the only person in the world who could stop it. The record doesn't matter. What matters is that Wallace gets to go home to his daughter. Petty gets to argue with medics. Reyes gets to carry a story that will make him stronger for the rest of his career. Donovan gets to rethink everything he believed about strength. And you get to sit here and watch the sun come up. Brooks looked at the sunrise. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Thank you," he whispered. Emily stood. She put her hand on top of his head, a gesture so brief and so gentle it was almost nothing. Almost. Then she walked away. 6 a.m. The debrief lasted 2 hours. Emily sat in a secure conference room in the East Wing and recounted every detail of the operation from placement through execution. Director Harmon listened. 2 analysts recorded. A JAG officer took notes for the legal proceedings that would follow. Emily's voice was steady throughout, clinical, precise. Every timestamp, every round fired, every decision and the reasoning behind it. When she finished, Harmon dismissed the analysts and the lawyer. He sat alone with Emily in the empty room. "The commendation package has already been drafted," he said. "Bronze Star with Combat Distinguishing Device. Purple Heart for the injury sustained. Navy Cross is under consideration, pending review. I don't need medals, sir. You need them for your service record, which needs them for your next assignment, which needs them because people like you don't stop, Hayes. You don't retire. You don't settle down. You walk out of this room and into the next operation because that's who you are." Emily didn't argue. He was right. She had been doing this since she was 21 years old. 14 years of operations. 14 years of becoming other people, living other lives, and walking away from all of them without looking back. "The Marines," she said. "What happens to them?" "Commendations for all 5. Donovan and Reyes will receive the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. Brooks, Wallace, and Petty will receive Purple Hearts. They deserve more. They'll receive what the system allows. You know how this works." "I know how this works. I'm asking you to make it work differently." Harmon looked at her for a long time. "I'll see what I can do." "Thank you, sir." 8:15 a.m. 3 days later, a classified briefing room in a restricted wing of Walter Reed. The room had no windows, 1 door, a long table, 6 chairs on one side, 1 chair on the other. Sergeant Marcus Donovan sat in the center of the 6 chairs. To his left, Corporal Jamie Reyes. To his right, Private First Class Daniel Brooks, his arm in a sling. At the far end, Private Petty, still moving carefully because his head still throbbed whenever he turned too fast. Wallace's chair was empty. He was in recovery, stable, expected to make a full return to duty within 4 months. They had been told to report at 0800 in dress uniforms. They had been told nothing else. The room was silent. 5 men who had shared the worst night of their lives and hadn't spoken about it since, because they had been ordered not to, because none of them had the words yet, and because some things need silence before they need language. Donovan sat with his hands folded on the table. His knuckles were scarred from a career of hitting things that needed hitting. His left ear was bandaged where the round had grazed him. He had not slept more than 2 hours in the past 3 days. He was thinking about a nurse who dropped trays. The door opened. Every man in the room turned. A woman walked in. She was not wearing scrubs. She was not wearing crooked glasses. Her hair was not in a messy ponytail. She did not stumble. She did not apologize. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes walked into that room wearing navy dress whites. Every ribbon, every medal, every mark of a career spent in the most dangerous places on earth, arranged in perfect rows across her chest. The seal trident gleamed gold above them. 2 bronze stars, a Purple Heart, a Defense Distinguished Service Medal, awards that most officers spend entire careers hoping to receive one of, and she wore them in rows. She walked to the single chair on the other side of the table. She did not sit. She stood, and she looked at each of them, one by one. Donovan, who had mocked her, and then fought beside her, and then kept a killer breathing for 23 minutes because she asked him to. Reyes, who had carried a man twice his weight through darkness because there was nothing else to do, and no one else to do it. Brooks, who had stood alone at a door and held it because someone told him to, and he was too young and too brave to question it. Petty, who had woken from unconsciousness and immediately asked where his brothers were. And the empty chair where Wallace should have been. Wallace, who had nearly bled to death defending a nurse's station and had spent his final conscious moments asking someone to tell his daughter he wasn't scared. Emily looked at that empty chair the longest. "Gentlemen," she said, "my name is Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. For the past 5 days, I served in your ward under the cover identity of Nurse Emily Carter. My mission was to protect Commander Nathan Caldwell and identify the internal threat to his life. That mission is complete." She paused. "I owe each of you something that isn't in any briefing document or commendation package. I owe you honesty. I deceived you. Every day, every interaction, every stumble and every apology was a calculated act designed to make you dismiss me. I did it because the mission required it, but the cost of that deception was your trust, and I want you to know that I'm aware of that cost." Donovan spoke. His voice was rough. "You saved our lives. You saved mine. When Sergeant Donovan chose to follow me to the MRI suite instead of evacuating, he covered an entrance that would have gotten me killed. When Corporal Reyes moved Commander Caldwell through the maintenance corridors under fire, he ensured the primary objective survived. When Private Brooks held room 4 alone in total darkness, he bought the time I needed to thin the assault force. When Private Petty regained consciousness and applied pressure to Corporal Wallace's wound, he kept a Marine alive who would otherwise have bled out on that floor." She looked at each of them again. "I set the trap. I built the plan. I engaged the enemy, but none of it would have mattered if I hadn't been surrounded by Marines who refused to quit when every rational instinct told them to. You were outnumbered. You were outgunned. You were cut off, in the dark, with no information and no support, and you fought anyway. Not because someone ordered you to, because that's who you are." The room was silent. Reyes was blinking hard. Brooks was staring at the table. Petty was gripping the edge of his chair with both hands. Donovan sat perfectly still, his jaw locked, his eyes fixed on the woman across the table who had just said the things he would never be able to say himself. Emily reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small coin, bronze, the size of a silver dollar. On one face, the seal trident. On the other, an inscription that none of them could read from their chairs. She walked around the table, stopped in front of Donovan, held out the coin. "This is a DEVGRU challenge coin. It's not given lightly. There are people who spend 20 years in the teams and never receive one." Donovan looked at the coin, looked at her. "I can't accept that." "You can. You earned it. Not by fighting beside me, by trusting me when everything you believed told you not to. That takes a different kind of courage, Sergeant, the kind that doesn't get taught in any school." Donovan took the coin. His hand was steady, his eyes were not. Emily produced 4 more coins. She gave one to Reyes, who held it like it was made of glass. She gave one to Brooks, who closed his fingers around it and pressed it against his chest. She gave one to Petty, who looked at it and then looked at her and said, "Does this mean I can tell people I got a coin from a Navy SEAL?" "It means you can tell people you fought beside one." She placed the 5th coin on Wallace's empty chair. Then she stepped back. "I have one more thing to say, and then I'm leaving, and you will not see me again. What happened at Walter Reed will be classified. Your commendations will reference a security incident. The details will be sealed. My name will not appear in any official record connected to that night. As far as the world knows, Nurse Emily Carter was transferred out after the incident and reassigned to another facility." She paused. "But you will know the truth, and I need you to carry that truth, not as a burden, but as proof of something that matters. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one with the most weapons, or the loudest voice, or the biggest reputation. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has been dismissed, the one who has been overlooked, the one who everyone has decided doesn't matter. She looked at Donovan. Next time you see someone you think is weak, look twice. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she turned, walked to the door, and stopped with her hand on the handle. Sergeant Donovan, yes, ma'am. Tell your daughter the Navy needs women like her. Tell her I said so. She opened the door, she stepped through, and she was gone. No applause, no cameras, no spotlight, just a closing door and a silence that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Donovan sat in that silence for a long time. He turned the challenge coin over in his fingers. He read the inscription on the back that none of them had been able to see from across the table. 4 words. The quiet are deadly. He closed his hand around it. 8:22 a.m. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes walked out of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for the last time. A black sedan was waiting. She got in. The door closed. The car pulled away. She did not look back at the building. She did not look at the parking lot where she had leaned against a wall and let herself breathe. She did not look at the window of the ward where she had dropped trays and spilled juice and apologized her way into invisibility. She looked forward, because there was always another mission, another name to wear, another room full of people who would underestimate her, another darkness to walk into, alone, armed with nothing but discipline and the unshakable knowledge that the person they never saw coming was the one they should have feared the most. Somewhere in a recovery ward, Wallace opened his eyes. His daughter was holding his hand. He looked at the challenge coin on his bedside table and smiled. Somewhere in a barracks, Brooks held a bronze coin against his forehead and made a promise to himself that he would never again judge someone by what they appeared to be. Somewhere in a classified hearing room, Victor Klein, in a wheelchair, began naming every senator, every general, and every defense contractor who had paid him to kill an American intelligence officer. His voice was flat. His eyes were empty. Every breath he took, he knew, belonged to a woman who could have let him suffocate on the floor of an MRI suite and chose not to. And somewhere on a road that didn't appear on any map, in a car that didn't have plates, a woman with bruises on her throat and blood under her fingernails closed her eyes and rested. Not for long. Never for long. The Marines of Ward 7 never forgot that night. They carried it in their bones, in their silence, in the weight of a bronze coin that reminded them of a truth most people never learn. The most dangerous weapon in modern warfare is not the rifle. It is not the drone. It is not the missile or the magnet or the syringe. It is discipline disguised as weakness. And sometimes the person checking your pulse is the one prepared to stop your heart.